Good morning, everybody. A very warm welcome to you all. Thank you for joining us today. Please let me introduce you to Gene Leonard, my co-host for this morning. Good morning, Gene.
Good morning, Kate. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Gene, before we get started, I'm a little bit curious. Can you tell me what possessed you to think about applying the lean transformation to a country?
Well, yes. First of all, Kate, good morning again, and good morning to all of you that are listening in. And thank you very much. We do appreciate you taking the time out of your schedules. Well, let me go back. The first time I heard about this lean transformation framework was from John Shook. He was the CEO of the Lean Enterprise Institute and the fountain of a lot of lean knowledge for a good number of years. He's since retired. But as soon as I heard this transformation framework and how it helps understand change and help change happen in organizations, I got it. And by the way, that was at a conference in Venice, of all places. God, to be back in those days. But this framework we've been using extensively at LBS Partners since, and it has proved very useful for us. And it explains how organizations work and how change happens in 5 dimensions. We'll go into that in a video we're going to share with you. But I began thinking about habits, in the changing of habits in organizations, and how we needed really all 5 of the dimensions to work to change the habits. And then, of course, as this lockdown and these strange times arrived, we all had more time on our hands. And I was thinking about the messages and what we were being asked to do and the changes we were being asked to make in our lives. Nefit were asking us, the Taoiseach and others were asking us to make changes. And they really were trying to change the habits of a nation. So I was curious about this. It was like a much bigger problem than the one we were dealing with the organizations we work with. So I talked to some people in our organization, and it raised curiosity, to say the least. So you'd often say when you have ideas like that, you should write it down. But in these modern eras, writing down isn't the option. We have to go into this digital world and record it. So that's what we chose to do. And with my colleagues now, I feel like some of my colleagues, particularly Kate and Adam, who produced this with us, I feel like you actually belong in a different country. You know, you come from a digital land and I live in this undigital land. And I visit there occasionally with you and kind of like what I see, but it doesn't feel native to me. But anyway, Kate and Adam and the team here at LBS have produced this video. Now, we're applying this transformation to Ireland. The video we're going to take you through is about 25 minutes long. It doesn't feel too long, and hopefully you'll enjoy it. By the way, I'm not a politician, and if it feels like I'm preaching to politicians, I don't mean to. I fully respect, particularly having thought about some of this, fully respect what they have to do. But just one last thing before I ask Kate to run this piece of video is, will you please think of yourself with 2 hats almost, as that citizen of Ireland or customer or even employee. You know, you're a member of the team or the organization, and also think of yourself as a leader. So with that, I'd like to just hand it back to you, Kate. Those are those are the thoughts that got us here, and sure, we'll see how it goes.
Super. Thanks, Gene.
At LBS Partners, we think a lot about change. We work with organizations who are delivering a service or product every day, solving all sorts of challenges for their customers and making sure that they are relevant and competitive into the future. Leaders need to ensure that their organization, their tribe, are aligned with their customers' needs, have the resources to succeed, have the correct capabilities, have excellent ways of working, and of course deliver the product or service at the lowest cost, immediately and flawlessly. Free, perfect, and now. The framework we use in our own organisation and with our clients has 5 dimensions. It is very versatile. We have applied it with success from the smallest organisations to very large organisations. It works just as well at departmental or divisional level within those organisations. We asked ourselves how versatile is our transformation framework. And thinking about more complex organisations, we thought a little outside the box. How would the framework work for our country, Ireland? We often use the phrase Ireland Inc. when ideas from the commercial world are applied to Ireland. Let's see how the framework stands up to scrutiny. Ireland has changed. We used to be quite a closed country. Now we are truly open and global. We used to have an agrarian economy. Our role was to feed Britain. Now we create technology, medicines and services for Irish consumption and for export globally. The majority of Irish people lived in rural areas. Now we are predominantly urban. Our population was homogeneous. Now it is incredibly diverse. We were religious. Now maybe spiritual-ish. Back then, Irishness was defined by our language, our music, our sports, our heritage, and we lived in the shadow of our neighbour. What defines us now? What does it mean to be Irish in 2021? What kind of Ireland do I want to live in into the future? Do I want my children and grandchildren to inherit? I did some research to see if I could find any vision or plan for the future, maybe a publication by the Office of the Ireland Director of Strategy. I was curious to know if I, as a proud Irishman, subscribe to the aspirations of my nation. We always start with the customer. It's not so simple in the case of Ireland. Who is the customer? Well, a citizen maybe, and we could use the persona of a typical citizen. But let's delve into this a little further. We have dependent citizens. We have people in the productive sectors producing goods and services for Irish consumption and for export. We also have the people who support them within their own organisations and in other private companies. But we also have the people in the public sector who support all of us in our daily lives. We have a myriad of others who create value and enrich our lives through the arts and entertainment and sport. So the customer is any and all of the above. We are all getting and giving value to each other on an hourly basis. We're a very large tribe, a nation. So what does it mean to be Irish in 2021? What are the aspirations of Ireland, the organisation? Are us the Irish in the 21st century? What kind of a country do we want to be and do we want to leave for the next generation? What do we want to be in 2031 or in 2041? To apply our transformation framework to Ireland, I needed to answer two questions. First, what is Ireland's purpose, vision, mission, or aspirations as a nation? And second, what is my purpose and aspiration in life? And of course, I was hoping for closer alignment. If not, I wonder should I resign and apply for another citizenship? In the same way people change jobs to further their careers. Could I further my citizenship with a better nation? I don't think so. You as leaders in your own organisations, households or communities are citizens also. I want you to think of your two roles, first as a citizen employee of Ireland Inc. and secondly as a leader in your own organisation. With your citizen employee cap on, how well connected are you to your organisation, Ireland in this case? Do you know what is expected of you? What you can expect? Is Ireland performing well for you, for your loved ones? Is Ireland performing well for the more vulnerable or dependent Irish residents? How would you know? As an employee, you would have a manager or leader and get regular feedback. You would know how you were doing. You would get regular feedback about your performance, your team's performance, and your organisation's performance. As citizens, we have no performance appraisal system for ourselves or indeed for our leaders. What do you think of our leadership? It's much broader than Micheál Martin, by the way. Equate your role as a citizen and how you feel with that of an employee within your own organisation. What would that employee say about their leadership? You, in this case. How are we doing? Where are we going? Am I aligned with my organisation, my tribe? We can all use a little introspection from time to time. I began talking about applying a change management or operational excellence framework to Ireland. Let me introduce our framework to you. The language is business speak. Don't worry too much. We'll explore each of the 5 dimensions shortly.
The Lean Transformation Framework is a simple model for introducing change successfully to an organisation. It provides the basic structure required to implement lean thinking. Here it is represented as a house, where parts of the structure of the building represent the dimensions of the lean transformation. The roof represents the purpose, which is to provide value to the end customer on time to the best quality standard at a reasonable price. The roof is supported by 2 pillars, process and capability. Process looks at how the work is completed to meet the customer's needs. Ask yourself, what is the work to be done? Capability looks at how people need to be developed to complete the work right first time. Ask yourself, what capabilities must our employees possess to successfully perform the work? Your people, the employees, live inside this house. The management processes define the systems and expected behaviours which are necessary to drive performance at all levels of your organisation. Ask yourself, what management system will optimise process and capability output? What behaviours are expected from management and employees? The foundation of the building is the culture, the basic thinking which exists and the leadership style guiding your organisation. Ask yourself, what is the basic way of thinking in your organisation? What are the basic assumptions behind this thinking? The Lean Transformation Framework will be your roadmap. Consider your purpose, process, capability, management system and culture before you set off on your lean journey.
Let me recap on the 5 dimensions in the context of Ireland. I'll do this by framing a question that captures the essence or principles behind that particular dimension. In the first dimension, in business we ask, what is our value-driven purpose? For Ireland, does our country have a stated purpose, vision or mission? Do we all know it? Are we aligned with it? In dimension 2, in business we ask, what is the work to be done and how can we improve it? It's much more diverse in the case of a country. What resources and processes are required to deliver all of the products and services, both public and private, healthcare, education, security, and so forth. The third dimension speaks to capability. In business, we would ask the question, what capabilities are required to fulfill the products and services of the organisation? Again, for a country, the question is much broader than that. What capabilities are required to continue to prosper and, of course, to heal the planet? Dimension 4 talks about management systems and the behaviours required of leaders in an organisation. Now, it's a little different again in the case of the country. Do any of us know how Ireland is doing right now? where we feel we are doing okay as a nation, what would the numbers say if we could collect them? How do we know how we are doing in all our endeavours? And of course the other question, what are the behaviours that should be modelled by key influencers and how are they being modelled? And then the final dimension, what's our basic thinking in this country? I suppose we could rephrase that. What kind of a society do we want to be? Let's start with dimension 1. Does our country have a stated purpose, vision and mission? I did a little revision of my Irish history. We have Fógra na Publiachta, or the 1916 proclamation. We also have the Declaration of Independence delivered to Dáil Éireann, the Revolutionary Parliament of the Irish Republic, at its first meeting in the Mansion House, Dublin, on the 21st of January 1919. Until now I didn't understand there was a difference between the Declaration of Independence and Fógra na Publiachta. There you go. We also have Bunreacht na hÉireann, the Irish Constitution that was enacted in July 1937. Of course, there are gazillions of other documents, declarations, speeches and laws that help define us. One interesting piece of media I did find was from Ireland.ie.
100 years ago, we took our place among the nations of the world. And we've realized when we share what's good, great things can happen. We are a small island, but when we give the world our words, we write its stories. With our dance, we start new movements. With our soldiers, we make peace. Our teachers touch hearts and our ideas open minds. And when we give the world our people, we build bridges. We are forging futures without boundaries while connecting with our past. We are a small island, but when we share what's best in us, great things can happen.
That's as good as it gets. There are a few interesting places we can look for inspiration. The OECD have the Better Life Index. It's well worth spending a little time to understand the work they've done to create a benchmark and to see how Ireland is doing. This kind of measurement and transparency is what we need. The United Nations have 17 sustainable goals. They are slowly but surely finding their way into national policy here. We should have Ireland's equivalent of the 17 goals. They're pretty all applicable to us. I found some interesting information on the website of the Finnish government. It's a country that's done a good job in this area. The government of inclusive and competent Finland, a socially, economically and ecologically sustainable society. This is the programme of Prime Minister Sanna Marin's government 2019, and it's published on the internet in a way that's engaging and informative. It can explain to us and draw us in to how we can help and support the programme. And while we're on the subject, the EU sets out its stall quite well, albeit in a different way. EU policies aim to ensure the free movement of people, goods, services and capital within the internal market, enact legislation in justice and home affairs, and maintain common policies on trade, agriculture, fisheries and regional development. After the Brexit negotiations of the last 4 years, none of that is a surprise to any of us, but it's laid out well there. Next, we need to figure out how that vision is brought to life. If this were a business, we would have some form of organisational structure. Let's call our Taoiseach, Micheál Martin, the CEO for the moment. Come to think of it, we have 3 CEOs, as the leaders of the 3 parties need to consult. Would any of you enjoy that kind of close collaboration and decision making? In the high-tech sector, pair programming is used for software development, and it involves two people sitting together at the same machine, writing the software together. The idea is 2 brains and 4 eyes are better than 1 brain and 2 eyes. Just imagine 3 brains, 6 eyes, 1 voice, and keeping that harmony. The government is the senior leadership team. A typical organisation in business is depicted using an organogram. Our Cerberus is in charge of 17 government departments. So each minister is loosely connected with a government department controlled by a Secretary General. Then of course we have 31 councils that run the counties around the country. And if that weren't enough, we have 208 other agencies that are affiliated. There is a myriad of other organisations such as schools, hospitals, care homes, prisons, sports clubs, art centres, all sorts of associations and businesses that are influenced and seek to influence the leadership team. I thought about writing up the job description, but what's the strategy for Ireland? Again, my searches didn't uncover a definitive strategy other than the programme for government. That programme has 12 mission statements that serve as the current strategic implementation plan. In contrast, I'd like to show you what one of our fellow members of the European Community, Finland, have. It's called the Programme of Prime Minister Sanna Marin's Government 2019. Inclusive and Competent Finland, a socially, economically and ecologically sustainable society. 2 things are striking. It's written and presented in quite an engaging way, what I would expect from a well-run multinational corporation. It's also quite futuristic in its ambition. Maybe we have the same for Ireland, but I didn't find it. All 5 million citizens should know what we the Irish are about, and it should be available in age-appropriate and ability-appropriate manner for all citizens. Instagram stories, animated cartoons on Ireland.ie YouTube channel or wherever, but it should engage all citizens. The second dimension relates to processes by which value gets delivered. I'm certainly not going to enumerate or critique all the processes in Ireland, but there are a few points I would like to make. We should all have good processes to follow in the execution of our work. At LBS Partners, we define a process as a series of actions or steps taken in order to achieve a particular end. Processes take inputs and convert them to an output that provides value for a customer. Take an example, managing the appointments for clinics at our hospitals. It's probably done more than 1,000 different ways by administrators using different IT platforms and solutions, with different waiting lists and policies. Wouldn't it be great if there was one right way? Another question we need to answer is how well each process is doing. That should be visible and transparent. We like to ask the question, are we ahead or behind? We owe it to every worker in the country, everybody who's creating value or working within a process, that they know the answer to that question. There's a larger question. Is Ireland ahead or behind in its programme for government? And of course, the final thing around processes is how are we improving them? We always need to be applying some of our thinking to how we can make those processes better, perform better in the future for their customers. Dimension 3 speaks to capability. When we think about the education and capability of Irish people, we are right up there. We should give our leaders a clap on the back here. We feature very high on the OECD education rankings. However, technology dictates that we don't become complacent. We really need to reimagine primary and secondary education for 2031 and 2041. There's a popular Chinese proverb that says, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. This proverb really does apply to education. What kind of education and knowledge and capabilities will our children of today need in the coming decades? It's interesting to reflect that more than 100 years ago, Pádraig Pearse wrote a great piece condemning our inherited education system. While I wouldn't use the title he used, the murder machine, the same gap is opening up again. How well prepared will our students be for the world they grow into, was the question that was asked then, and we need to ask it again now. We also need to reimagine lifelong learning. What jobs will exist in 2041 in Ireland? How many of each job? The planning in Ireland for the private sector and public sector will need to educate for these needs. Skillnet's education and training boards and third level institutions are leading our charge at the moment. What is their vision? Our Minister for Further Education needs to be a clairvoyant as well as a bureaucrat. He should be spending time with technologists at cutting edge health delivery sites, with climate experts, and absorbing the culture and apparatus of successful modern countries, regions and industries. Dimension 4 is perhaps the most important of all the dimensions. It includes the management system that helps us to direct, understand and guide the performance, and it's also where our leaders get to demonstrate their behaviours and model what being a good citizen is all about. Let's take each of these in turn. The management system is used to engage all members of an organisation in effective communication and management of the key processes. It usually has a daily pulse meeting that sets the beat rate of the organisation. At the Dell Customer Centre in Dublin, they have a series of morning meetings to ensure that customers across the continents are adequately supported and exceptions are escalated and resolved by top management. Wouldn't it be great if there was a dashboard that showed how Ireland is doing today? We need to work really hard to make the performance measurable and transparent. There's no reason why our goals couldn't be aligned with the 17 UN Sustainable Goals. If you think about it, all countries in the world really need to be aligning their goals and putting in consistent performance towards those goals and objectives. We all need to work together. We need to develop a growth mindset. If we don't seek and act on things to improve, we are doomed to mediocrity, or worse, the bottom divisions. The first step of improvement is transparency, making performance visible. And that's where the fourth dimension does its heavy lifting. In business, great leaders spend most of their time with customers and employees. They can do this safe in the knowledge that their business performance is supported by very dependable processes and very capable people. Ireland's citizens are effectively members of the organisation and customers of the organisation. What is our culture in Ireland today? What does it need to be? How will we change our habits to shift the dial? COVID has taught us a lot. Habits are extremely difficult to change. It's virtually impossible to do all the right socially distancing things for very long periods. It will only be done by addressing all 5 of the dimensions we're speaking about, and by a colossal and relentless demonstration and reinforcement of these good behaviours day in, day out, all the while demonstrating compassion and empathy. Every citizen can play a role here. However, those in positions of influence, old or young, must show leadership. From the captains of a sports team to the president, from TV presenters to politicians, 20-year-olds to 90-year-olds. If you have an opportunity, you must use it. If you have an audience, you must demonstrate the right behaviours as best you can.
Don't tell anybody, but let me wait till a little bit after the election. I appreciate the advice. I appreciate that.
You're engaged in and you're working with the most decent government in the world. And we have to restore the soul of this country, and I'm counting on all of you to be part of that. But I'm not joking when I say this. If you're ever working with me and I hear you treat another colleague with disrespect, talk down to someone, I promise you I will fire you on the spot. On the spot.
I'd like to conclude with 3 pieces of advice I would like to offer to Ireland's CEO. All citizens should have a clear understanding of what our nation stands for and be proud to support it. The story of our purpose should be told in our schools, in our businesses, in our institutions, and demonstrated locally and internationally through our accomplishments. Second, we should all take our turn to demonstrate leadership, and those with more profile must use it to its utmost to lead. Finally, it will not happen without transparency and accountability, and the humility that goes with that transparency. Thank you.
Wow, an awful lot of food for thought there, Gene. I'm actually going to jump right in and ask my own question while the audience is thinking about something they'd like to quiz you on, Gene. So if Micheál Martin was here with us this morning and asked for some advice on what to do next, what would you suggest?
I think I'd apologise for what I just said and run away quickly. Well, Kate, honestly, Kate, I mean, they've a terribly difficult job to do. And I think, I certainly got an appreciation of the complexity of the organisation. But one thing, first of all, and I kind of made a few points there towards the end, one thing that does really stand out is that while our leaders are caught up in the day-to-day, much like a lot of us do in the day-to-day cut and thrust of business, they really need to help us have this vision for the country that propels us into the future. And I think the example of the Finland, how they've done some work, and it doesn't have to be a really inspiring, charismatic leader. It can be just get it clear so that people can say, yeah, I like what the country's trying to do and I can vote into that. We need a bit more of that kind of inspiration where it's clear and it's communicated well to us what the purpose is. And then it's easier to do the day-to-day stuff and understand why people do things. I suppose the advice that's more for everybody else than specifically for Micheál Martin, but everybody has a role to play, is we all can do our little bits of leadership from time to time. But the thing I really feel most strongly about is transparency. A lot of the, particularly multinationals and now a lot of the indigenous companies in Ireland have figured out that they need to make the performance of their organisations very transparent and make it easy for people to collaborate. It's the one thing that's really missing. It's very hard to know how the country is doing, how different aspects of Ireland are doing. So I really think transparency, and different industries cottoned on very early. The aerospace industry figured out how to get air safety, improve air safety by being transparent about accidents and getting reports out fast and having statistics about it. And the healthcare industry is taking on some of those practices. More and more, I think that culture of transparency is what we need. Those are my small things, but I mean, it's a big country and it's a big organisation to be trying to influence.
Thanks, Gene. We've got a couple of questions coming through. The first one here is, does our election system lead to parish pump politics, pulling strokes and short-term view? And should it change?
Well, God, I'm, as I said at the outset, I am not a politician. I think we have a fantastic proportional representation system. I don't think there's anything wrong with the actual system of electing people. I think we have a huge problem with how we would hold them accountable. It's that lack of transparency, how a particular unit, be it a council or a government department or one of those agencies, the 208 agencies I talked about, It's making them accountable for what they do, having a decent, clear strategy that we understand, and then telling us the performance of that strategy. It's that accountability that we need to change, rather than anything to do with the electoral system itself. And if we don't have that kind of transparency, then we end up with the parish pump kind of, pulling strokes and influencing people. The same happens in organizations that don't have that kind of clarity. People use the other methods of influencing, and that's where we've ended up, I think.
Okay, thanks, Gene. Another question. Can you comment on the Ireland Project 2040, please? Does this serve as a guide or vision for Ireland going forward?
All of there are various projects. I'm not very well read on all the different ideas in all the different departments that are there, but I think the aspirations of the plans tend to be very good. They tend to have the right idea. They tend to be pointing in the right direction. Where they seem to fall down, and again, we learn this all the time in industry, they fall down on the implementation, just having a clear implementation plan with the milestones and the transparency that they're being delivered as they go. They tend to be a little softer, aspirational in their intention, and then it kind of stops, and I don't know who's meant to pick up the pieces and make it all happen. But I think that's where, again, we find it. I find it in our own company. We find it with our clients. It's hard to get those ideas implemented. They're always more complicated and slower than we think. So the plans are good. It's the implementation of them and the transparency of them that we need to focus on.
Great. Thanks for that. I'll give it another second, just see if we have any other questions coming through. While I'm waiting for that, I'd just like to thank you all for attending, and to those of you who posed questions this morning. Please feel free to reach out with us with any additional questions that you do have. And we'll follow up with this recording in the next 24 hours. One more question has actually just come through. So before we wrap up, Gene, how do you feel Ireland is positioned to deal with the move into the intelligent machine age, and how can we adopt?
I feel quite optimistic. We're a small nation, and our industrial base is quite modern. The IDA and the policies that were enacted through the 50s and 60s really set us up very well. So we've a good, intelligent, young workforce, and I think we're adapting very quickly. We can't get complacent, and there are very smart countries out there. Some countries are moving forward socially very well, and some are moving forward technically very well. We need to keep an eye on those. I mean, I look to the Nordics. They seem to be advancing very quickly on all fronts. And you have countries that have advantages. They're not as democratic as we are, like Singapore, that can move quickly. But we have the advantage of being a small, modern country in many ways. And our outlooks, we've seen from some of the referendums and things, are very modern. So I'd be very optimistic. But we have to stay vigilant, and we have to educate people, and people have to be curious towards lifelong learning. These days, you can't not be learning in 2021.
Fantastic. Well, on that note, I think you've left us all with an awful lot of food for thought, Gene. So thank you very, very much for that.
And Kate, could I just thank you and Adam and everybody else that helped put this together, and thanks to all of you who tuned in this morning to listen. Hope you got something out of it, and thank you very much.
Great. Well, hopefully we'll see you all again soon, folks, on our next webinar, and we'll be in touch.
Thanks, Kate.